Hi everyone, and welcome to this World Travel Market Travel Forward session. I'm sorry about the delay to the start of this session. I think we had some technical issues on the platform, so sorry about that. It's just the wonderful modern platforms and the joy of doing a virtual event. So this session is called Cruise, Technology Can Save It. I'm Ian Richardson, CEO and co-founder of the Iceway. And I'm also chairman of the Cruise Lines International Association Technology Initiative, and I'll be moderating this session. Now, we've got a lot to get through in quite a short space of time, so I'm going to jump right in and start by setting the scene. So I first started out in the cruise industry as an IT manager in the 90s, and for more than 20 years, I've always been impressed with the cruise industry's robustness and ability to adapt. And the secret to the cruise industry's success is really the mobility of its vessels. If there's problems in one part of the world, such as weather or anything else, the ships can be moved. And they can also follow the sun in the winter, which enables the ships to earn revenue all year round. Now, this is why over the last 5 years, up until 2020, the cruise has been the fastest growing sector of the travel industry, with demand increasing by over 20% and over 100 new builds on the order book. There's a lot of ships on order. Now, nobody in the industry, including myself, expected a global pandemic. And then the worst thing happened when the cruise ships themselves became the center of some of the early outbreaks. It was a real PR nightmare. And it pretty much shut down the industry, as we know. And since then, the cruise lines have had to overcome huge challenges in repatriating guests and crew. They've been contending with the CDC no sail order in the US and having to refinance themselves to remain liquid to see this crisis out. So where are we now? Well, in Europe, there was a set of recommendations called the EU Healthy Gateways document that came out, and that was published early summer. And following these guidelines, it enabled some of the European lines to run successful cruises, MSC cruises being the most notable with the Grandiosa. In the US, Norwegian Cruise Line and the Royal Caribbean got together with the CDC, and they've produced a document called the Healthy Sail Panel Report, which contains 74 recommendations grouped into 5 key areas. And this, together with a lot of political pressure and lobbying, has allowed the no-sail order by the CDC to be lifted. And it's hoped that cruising is going to start early next year in a phased, slow-roll, ramped-up approach, following all the CDC guidelines. Now, the biggest challenge that the cruise lines have right now is to operationalize all these guidelines into working protocols and procedures. And on our esteemed panel today that are going to introduce themselves, we've got a number of tech leaders that are going to discuss exactly how technology can help do just that. So what I'd like to ask you to do, guys, is just to introduce yourself briefly, one by one, starting with you, Nick.
Thanks, Ian. I'm Nick Bell, an independent consultant who's worked in the maritime sector for over 20 years. I've worked as managing director and CTO for companies both on the buy and the supply side within the sector, including the likes of FRS and P&O. With my current hat on, with a strategic focus, I primarily work with my clients on their digital roadmaps and exploitation to the market.
Thanks, Nick. And maybe now Dan.
Thanks, Ian. So my name is Dan Pearson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Canopy Tools Group, an international group primarily based out of Australia and more recent times the United Kingdom and the United States. We are a Microsoft Gold partner that works predominantly in the AI, data and IoT spheres. So we provide solutions to a number of industries, ranging from defense through to resources and more recently into the shipping space. We build a product, which we'll touch on later on, which is the Canopy Managed product, which has been in inception for the last 3 years. And it's part of the solution we're going to talk about this evening. Oh, sorry, this day, so I'm in Australia.
Yeah, I know we've got a very diverse panel today. Everybody's everywhere. They're literally the opposite sides of the world. All right, thanks, Dan. And now we'll come on to Duncan, who I believe is in Canada.
Thanks, Ian. Yes, indeed. Good morning to everybody from New Brunswick, Canada. My name is Duncan McSparrow, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a company which I co-founded here in Canada called Cognitive Spark. We too are a Microsoft Global Gold Partner, and particularly in the area of mixed reality, and that's the use of on-head computer systems to enable individuals to do tasks more effectively and to make them a more effective part of the solution to operational problems. My own background has been very much focused on operational systems and making that work. I'm not from the IT sector. I set the company up in order to create solutions for the type of situation that the cruise industry is currently facing with COVID-19 and getting restarted. And what we'll be talking about as we go through today is how we can bring Remote Spark, our capabilities, to bear in order to be really agile and create sort of an increased robustness in order to deal with those localized situations that will occur on cruise liners as we get back to cruising. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Duncan. So, Dan and Duncan, your respective companies, you've sort of got together and collaborated, and you've come up with this Biosecure Framework, and that's addressing the 5 key areas of the 74 recommendations in the Healthy Sail report. So what I'm going to do now is just bring up for the audience a slide. There we go. So hopefully the audience can see that. So these are the 5 key areas of the Healthy Sail report, which the CDC recommendations are based on. So we have the first one, testing and screening, and then sanitation and ventilation, destination excursion planning, mitigating risks for crew members, and response contingency planning and execution. So they're the 5 key areas. And if I just move to the actual graphic itself, so this is the Biosecure Framework that you've collaborated on, and it really consists of 3 main components as I see it. You've got Canopy Manage, Canopy Monitor, and Remote Spark Medical HoloLens. So what I'd like to do now is just to, in the discussion, explore how these 3 components come together to address some of the key recommendations. And I'm going to do that maybe by stepping through a typical customer journey as we've got it laid out here. From embarkation in the home port, which is the blue box, through to the stopover port, the disembarking and re-embarking at transit ports, and also on board the ship as well. So maybe if I come to you first, Dan, if we look at the operations in the port, could you just explain how the check-in component will work?
Yeah, I mean, so Ian, what you're looking here is obviously a generic solution that could fit, in theory, any port or any cruise liner organization. So we've tried to make it as universal as possible. So Canopy is an overarch system that looks at all the 3 phases, so monitor, connect, and discover, which are essential to a safe passenger journey. So what you're looking at there in the top left is essentially the passenger management system that deals with the initial check-in, ticketing, docket, etc. And then you're looking at the check-in process. So if you follow the flow chart, when a person moves out the quarantine area, the first stop is obviously the thermal camera temperature at the check-in kiosk, where they get checked out for the temperature, which is pretty common to most points of entry on public transport these days. They then go into the self-service COVID questionnaire to answer a Q&A about their medical condition. And it should be noted as well that if you get to the thermal camera and you are in a COVID positive situation, this will not obviously process, or you won't proceed to the self-service. And then you actually get issued with the smart wearable device, which is the 3rd part of the check-in process. Right,
and I think we're going to get onto the actual smart wearable device a little bit later. But in terms of the the PMS integration. So obviously the cruise lines have this passenger management system which normally handles the check-in. You're looking at integrating the kiosk with that, are you? So they do this all-in-one kiosk?
Yes, that's correct. So the Canopy Manage is a microservices API platform. So integration to a PMS is no challenge. Essentially, a PMS is an industry-centric CRM and similar approach. So the idea being that the passenger's details get seamlessly transferred into the Canopy system. So
right. So
the process.
Right. So it'll be the PMS that kind of identifies the actual individual at the kiosk. Correct.
Yeah, exactly. So the PMS remains a central source of truth for the passengers. We're simply using it to glean the information to avoid duplicate data entry.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the boarding pass, because normally when people embark and they check in, they get issued with either a cruise card or some kind of boarding pass, which gets distributed to them, and that enables them to board the vessel, and they use that around the vessel to pay for things, and they use it to enter their cabin. That, just to be clear, that's the PMS part of the solution that would do that, or the cruise owns PMS. That part of the process wouldn't change in terms of this solution.
No, it wouldn't. No, that would remain under the PMS, which makes sense because it's a purpose for that. The whole idea of the Canopy solution is more about the safety components that you can see on this slide there.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the self-service COVID questionnaire, which obviously all the cruise lines are going to have to get their guests to complete, some of them are saying that, what they're doing is sending out these questionnaires prior to the customers travelling, before they actually leave home. Are you expecting that data from those questionnaires to be fed in to your back end or integrated in some way?
Yeah, look, they wouldn't be a difficult thing to actually integrate into the Canopy system. We simply needed to push the information in. In the airline space, we've seen a similar approach. And for example, when you travel to Cyprus, you have to upload your COVID negative certificate, to prove you've had a test. So any of these combinations we can support. Okay.
And obviously, privacy and data governance is a constant concern. And obviously, there's a lot of press about it with COVID, and a lot, people are starting to get concerned about the fact that these safety measures may be overlooking some of the privacy concerns that were previously very, very important to the industry with GDPR. So how would this be addressed to alleviate any concerns that guests and crew and cruise lines might have?
Look, we still see the Privacy Information Act, privacy of data, and GDPR as being very key components to protecting people's sensitive information, also commercially sensitive information. The platform we operate, the Canopy platform on, is Microsoft Azure, and out of the box, the components are up to protected level security. So it has an extreme level of encryption security already in place or inherited as part of its hosting environment or ecosystem. In terms of data protection, we take all the normal cybersecurity protection measures. The Canopy managed platform is also IP co-sale ready, which means it's been verified by Microsoft architects as part of the sales process. So there are a number of controlling measures to negate any risks of leakage of data, privacy information. Okay.
Right, I want to move on to testing now, or the testing component. And Nick, the cruise lines themselves have all committed across the whole industry to 100% testing, which is testing all crew and passengers, basically everybody on the ship. And we know that testing technology is advancing every day. What's your outlook, Nick, on the types of tests currently being used and what's in the future?
Well, I mean, essentially there have been three different types of tests over time, and they each have their advantages and disadvantages. But it's really clear that any solution needs to be capable of scaling to deal with the volume of passengers and crew that are going to be transiting through the port, on board and back. So if we sort of look at the very beginning, we started out with these PCR tests, which involve a saliva swab, checking essentially for the presence of antigens in the body. Now, they're very good at early detection, but they have a really low accuracy rate because they rely quite heavily on a correct swabbing technique. They also require, of course, a laboratory for processing, so it can take over 24 hours to get a result. Then came along rapid antibody tests, which use blood as the basis for the sampling rather than saliva. And they're a lot more accurate than PCR, but the detection is much later due to the incubation period of the virus. They can, however, be administered by trained healthcare professionals, so the result time is a lot quicker, 15 to 30 minutes. And I'm sure some of you have seen some of these tests being used across European airports over the last few months. And then most recently, we've got these rapid antigen tests, which are similar to the PCR tests, except as in the case of the antibody tests, there's no need for a laboratory, and the results are really rapid as well. So in a nutshell, the most effective testing strategy would be to implement a combination of both the antibody and the antigen tests, because early detection is essential, of course, but you also want the reliability and accuracy that a blood sample would provide.
Yeah, no, I believe MSC on the Grandiosa, when they went live over the summer, they were doing a two-phase testing approach, doing two separate types of tests as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to maybe talk a little bit more about the wearable with you, Dan. So tell us a little bit more about this smart wearable. Is it a proprietary device or a mass manufactured, well-known brand? Is it a specific brand?
This is the most asked question, I think, of the whole solution, Ian. So that's always
Well, everybody's got one.
It's got a cool factor, but no. What we're hoping to do is leverage the investment that cruise companies have already made in their wearable, rather than them have to purchase an entire new fleet, which presents its own logistics challenges.
Yes.
So the aim of the game is to reuse existing technology as much as possible, because they would have already invested on onboard technology such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or beaconing, whatever the primary system is on board, which I'll check my notes is the BUE. I'm reliably informed. So we would try and leverage existing technology where practical possible.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And I mean, so you're not actually necessarily supplying wearables, but it's really just leveraging the existing technology that some of the cruise lines have.
We're primarily a software company, so we focus on software integration and the components, and we work with hardware vendors to provide things like the kiosks and smart wearables. So where possible, we try and reuse rather than reintroducing new technology. Obviously, if existing technology is not in place, then we have partners and solutions to introduce the appropriate hardware. Yeah,
because obviously there's not all the cruise lines have all the infrastructure. I think on MSC there's only about five cruise ships that have got the MSC for me fully kitted out infrastructure for all the location tracking and the beaconing. But obviously they are rolling it out fleet wide.
Yeah, look, it's not an issue, Ian. If the technology is required, we can provide it. If it's there, we can use it. What's in existence?
Okay. And does it come with its own app, or are you just looking to interface with the cruise lines sort of app?
Unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but generally speaking, you will see an app installed on a smartphone at the commence of the cruise. Typically, that supports then the communications of the phone, so it's easier to get the phone talking as you're moving around to the smart wearable. So generally speaking, you'll see an app installed, which takes advantage, and then the smart wearable will actually communicate with the phone.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So, yeah, just one more question for you, Dan. And if we just move over to the sort of the transit port or stopover port, as it is on the document, in terms of disembarking and re-embarking at transit ports, are you looking to just follow the same procedure in terms of the kiosks? Are they actually located on board the ship? Do you move them from the ship to a local location at the transit port?
I think there's two important points at the stopover point. One is, as you say, the thermal camera kiosk, and it would have the ability to either get dismounted and put on the transit port, or actually taken as you board the ship. It really depends on the ship's process, but it's really flexible either way. The kiosk is not a major affair. Also important to note is that the smart wearable continues to be worn by the crew and passengers when they disembark the ship. So we still have that. Most smart wearables have the ability to cache information. So if it has been a changing situation while they've been off the ship, we have the ability to capture that information as it rejoins the ship, depending on which technology we're using on there. So that's an important note.
Okay, great, thanks. So let's talk about onboard, and I want to come to you, Duncan. So maybe if you could tell us more about the HoloLens solution that we see here, and how it can support the onboard medical teams.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. It's really just not about the crews, and that's, I think, a really important thing to get across here. This is about achieving new levels of operational capability and flexibility to allow resilience for the crew, and also of the ship and the operators of the ship, but also for the destinations as well themselves. And I want to sort of really use the HoloLens, and what we talk about the HoloLens as that sort of key piece. It's new technology. For most people, they consider the HoloLens, an on-head computer system, to be a little bit sort of sci-fi that they'd see on Star Trek or something along those lines. But what it is it really, to all intents and purposes, a system which allows somebody to work hands-free, but get the support that they need from either digital systems, such as the ones that we work with very closely with the team at Canopy Tools, or more importantly, the support of an expert who can be anywhere in the world, and that can help to really empower the individual who's on site to make the right decisions, and also to make sure that those people that he's working with, whether that's the purser on the ship or whether it's somebody in the engine room of the ship, more comfortable about that decision-making process, so we don't end up as people guessing, making decisions which lead to really sort of unfortunate consequences in the context of a particular ship, but also in that wider context, like I said, of the cruise line itself, and also the tourist destinations.
Right, and so really what it's doing is it's projecting a video image back to the remote person, or the remote worker, if you like, or the remote expert in this case, and or is it more of an augmented reality type solution?
So this is layers of information. So yes, it can include voice, and it can include video, but also the augmented reality piece, where what you're using are the digital assets which are created to help the individual understand that situation. So that might be, as a particular case in this deployment, be the support for medical staff on board. They're generalists, they work with everything, but they may have a situation where they need support which helps them to do something which is very specific. And what we can do is create on board for that team of generalists the augmented reality environment, which allows them to deal with that situation more effectively. And importantly, if you just take that context, you can do that for anything. So that's whether that's the support for the engineered systems on the ship, whether it's support for the medical crew on the ship, or whether it's the support for, has this room been cleaned in exactly the way that was required? Here's the check, and we'll just go around the room with the actual room staff as they go through a room. So the actual applications are almost limitless to support those generalists and make sure that there's the ability to do things the right way first time, every time.
Right, yeah, I mean, I can see it being very useful, not just for medical, but in all sorts of arenas. I mean, my company provides remote support to cruise lines, and I can see it being very useful. But where is the solution currently being used and deployed in other industries?
So it's being widely used in defence, and particularly in the maritime sector, and also with actually special operations groups are currently using this to do the medical side of things. So they're developing the systems and the process that they need in order to be able to deploy this into really austere locations. nothing like the type of situation that we would encounter on a cruise liner, where there's really good connectivity and also a very well resourced support team that will provide assistance to, whether it's the engineering team, as I mentioned, whether it's the actual operations team on the ship, the cruise managers, or in this particular case, one of those really easy to use and really easy to understand use cases, which is with the medical team, about how they deal with some of the issues that they'll have to do with under an incredibly tight set of regulations, such as the ones highlighted in the Safe Cruise Panel recommendations.
I know that there'll be. I have to ask this question in case there's any people from the cruise lines in the audience. But do you see any issues with the connection bandwidth at sea over satellite communications? Because that is always a concern for the cruise lines.
Yeah, and we understand that one fully. I come from a military background, and that really, when we set the company up, that low bandwidth capability was one of the first things that I said this had to work, and that's the reason why we've been so successful in the areas that we have been. And we've also undergone testing with Canadian government organisations to work at very low bandwidth, as low as 128 kilobits of bandwidth over satellite style communications, so 500 millisecond latency. So that's very much that, and it doesn't undermine, and we find this in a lot of sectors. They're really responding to the fact that we don't take away the bandwidth which is needed to operate a system effectively, whether that's a mine, whether it's a ship, whether it's in the oil and gas sector, or anything along those lines. So those are key considerations for us. And at that point, I just sort of like to really bring out one of the key points that Dan mentioned, and that's the fact that we are, both of us, are IP co-sell ready. We've been vetted by the largest tech company in the world as being leaders in our field. And that brings with it, for anybody that does want to sort of discuss these opportunities about how that our technical solutions might impact, it brings with it an agility that isn't necessarily present in other places, and it also brings confidence, security, and an ability to scale very rapidly from really world-leading capabilities, both on the part of Canopy Tools and also Remote Spark, to get this into place now so that it can help the teams on the ground now. And Remote Spark's mantra has always been, we need to get this out into the field so that remote work support solutions can support the worker where they need to work.
Yeah, time is of the essence, especially because a lot of the cruise lines are trying to restart now. There's a lot of activity going on, so that's so the timing is very, very good. Speaking of timing, I'm just aware of time, because we did start late, so we're probably going to have to cut it short. But I just want to finally, just for 1 minute, hand over to Nick as an independent consultant. You've got years of experience in the industry. What do you see as the main opportunities and challenges in the cruise industry actually adopting this?
Well, I think to start on the opportunities, I think for one, being able to fulfill the requirements of the CDC conditional sail order is right up there. But there's really a bigger aspect of play here, essentially by using the power of data and AI to create smart cruising. Now, we've already seen aspects of this at the operational end of the business, where AI is being used to gain more efficiency in voyage planning and fuel consumption, so on, predictive maintenance and so on. But it's relatively new at the guest experience level. With respect to the main challenges, I think it's important to point out that these technologies can be retrofitted to existing devices, like cameras and wearables and dispensers. So the technology and delivery is not the issue. I think with the CDC conditional sail order now at play, cruise companies have several more hurdles to jump through before they can resume sailing. So for me, the main challenges are going to be time, finding the right technology partner, and aligning health and safety protocols with the port authorities.
Okay, thanks, Nick. And I think that's probably about all we've got time for today. So I really appreciate all your time, guys. Thanks to the audience for attending Cruise Technology Can Save It. And a special thank you to Dan and Duncan and Nick. So thanks very much, guys, and enjoy the rest of the World Travel Market.
Thank you.